Good evening, folks. Chris here, aka the Jerk of all trades. Thought I'd do a little video on my homemade wood-fired hot water system, which a couple of people told me you might like a video of. So, backstory, one day I was digging through my collection of junk here, and I came across a 50-foot roll of half-inch copper tubing. And a couple of days later I was thinking to myself, if I stuck that copper tubing on top of the wood stove, plumbed in a tank so that it could thermosiphon into it, which I'll explain in a minute, when it was hot, then I bet I could generate some of my hot water off of this system. So a couple of nights later I was bored, it was about midnight, there may have been alcohol involved, and I decided to go ahead and do it. I hung that tank on the wall, I coiled the tubing all up and plumbed it in, got a fire going, and a couple hours later it was making hot water. I couldn't believe it. The next day I cranked the stove up for the day, and I was washing dishes and taking a shower using hot water from this. Now this system is plumbed in what's known as a tempering tank. What that means is that this tank gets cold water from the water pump. It goes through this tank and then out of this tank at the top, comes into this tank at the bottom, goes out of this tank at the top, and goes into a gas hot water heater that's in the utility room, so that it feeds preheated water into the gas hot water heater, the idea being that when you're running the stove it partially heats the water so you don't burn as much gas. Well, it turns out this makes up to 150 degree water, so I figured, well, it'll make all the hot water I need if I'm careful. So I plumbed in a set of valves in the next room next to the tank, next to the hot water heater, so that I could bypass it. So now I actually have the hot water heater turned off. As long as I'm using this stove, this always has hot water in it. And it's a 35-gallon tank. It's enough to take a shower because you use cold water with that. So, and it's certainly more than enough to do dishes. You do have to be careful because it, like I said, can get up to about 150 degrees of temperature of hot water temperature coming out the top of this. Your typical hot water in your house is 115 to 120. There's a temperature and pressure valve right here. This is the line going out to my hot water heater, or in this case it goes right past it and into the system. And this is the cold line coming in. At the bottom you can see that line goes right around the bottom of the stove 4 or 5 times and then goes right up to the top of the tank. There's no pump required because it thermosiphons. Hot water rises, cold water sinks in this system. So the cold water dropping it out of the bottom of the tank, the hot water rising up the pipe, it fills the tank with hot water all by itself. The system works pretty good for the nothing I had invested. I had the lines and I found some fittings kicking around. I scavenged some stuff that I had from other things. Stuck it together. It was 6-7 years ago. It's generated most of my hot water. I use almost no propane in the wintertime for hot water. And less in the summertime too, because even though the stove isn't going, this tank's at room temperature, so it has a chance for the water to come up again or temper before it goes into the hot water heater. I'm going to replace this when I move this stove into my house that I'm building next door. This is going to get replaced with some stainless steel coils inside the firebox to generate a lot more heat, and it's also going to be hooked up to the floor, so it's going to be heating the house through the floor from the stove downstairs and the floor upstairs and the slab downstairs. It's all going to be piped together with hot water. So there it is, just a short little video to explain this system. And I'm going to give it the usual disclaimer of please don't do anything that I do. I don't want to hear about you burning yourself with 150 degree hot water, which it'll literally cook your skin. You'll big giant blisters, it'll take the skin right off of you. I've never blown off the temperature and pressure valve, but it runs at 150 degrees up top when it's cranking. You can't put your hand in that. And and I don't copy my stove setup. This is Metal Best's pipe sitting on top of a welded steel cylinder that's welded to the top of the stove. It's all going to be replaced when I put it in the house for a little more safety. But this is the old trailer I've lived in for the last few years while I'm building a house, and it's going to be, a little different when it's out of there. But there it is. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe if you like what you see here. I'm going to put out a lot more videos with a lot of different content. And share it, hit that thumbs up, and I'll see you the next one. Have a good one.